Hi, I'm Steve Hendricks. It is so very good to be with you virtually. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm a freelance reporter and the author of a new book called The Oldest Cure in the World: Adventures in the Art and Science of Fasting. My talk today is fasting to 100, when to eat and when not to, for a longer, healthier life. We all know that what you eat is important for your health, and the more whole plant foods, the better. But most of us don't know that when we eat is nearly as important. In fact, scientists have recently discovered that when we eat and when we don't eat can almost certainly add years to or subtract years from our lives. Those choices can also help determine whether our years are healthy or diseased. In my book, I talk about two kinds of fasting: prolonged fasting, which is fasting for multiple days or weeks, and daily fasting, which is fasting for a certain number of hours each day. I'm going to focus today on the latest research on daily fasting, which I found astonishing and which might just change how you eat for the rest of your life. Before we're done, I'm going to leave you with three big principles about when to eat that I hope you can use to be healthier. The first thing to know about daily fasting is that you're already doing it. You finish eating at night. For most people, it's night. You go to sleep. You break your fast the next morning at breakfast or with your first cup of coffee. The vital question that scientists have begun exploring in just the last 5 or 10 years is this: how long should our overnight fast be if we want to be at our healthiest? And the answer that they've come back with resoundingly is that we're healthier when our overnight fasts are longer. That's why so many people have started doing what are called 16-8 or 18-6 eating patterns, where you fast for 16 or 18 hours a day and then do all your eating in an 8-hour or 6-hour window. Eating in a window like that is healthier because it gives our bodies more time to repair more of the parts of our cells that are forever getting damaged and breaking down. Now, our bodies are marvelous self-healing machines. They are constantly making repairs to damaged and broken parts that save us from disease. If our bodies didn't do that, not many of us would be here a few years from now. The problem is, these repairs usually go on only at a very low rate. That's because our bodies are busy most of the rest of the time doing all the other things that make up our lives. One of those things, one that takes an enormous amount of time and energy, is digesting our food, sending the nutrients from that food to cells in every nook of our bodies, and putting the nutrients to work in those trillions of cells. But when we stop eating for long enough, we give our bodies a break from that very heavy labor, and they take advantage of the rest while we're fasting to accelerate their repairs. The fixes that our bodies make during this accelerated repair period are phenomenal. Our cells will patch up more of our miscopied or damaged DNA. They'll make more antioxidants to counter the oxidative assaults that we endure around the clock. They'll break down more of our worn-out organelles and send the components of those organelles onward to become the building blocks of fresh new cellular parts in a process called autophagy. They'll also kill off more cells that are too far gone to be repaired in a process called apoptosis. And then when we refeed, they'll replace those sacrificed cells with healthy new cells. These repairs not only save us from disease in the long run, but also yield immediate benefits. Because of repairs like these, when we fast, we have less body-wide inflammation. Systemic inflammation, we know, is the handmaid to so many awful diseases. If we have high blood pressure, it will decrease on a fast. If we're insensitive to insulin, we will grow more sensitive to it when we fast. And although this talk is about daily fasting, I'll just note here that if we fast long enough, for days or weeks, almost always with the help of a fasting doctor, I should say, we can reverse and sometimes entirely eliminate a truly incredible range of diseases, including cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, asthma, allergies, autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis and ulcerative colitis, and many more diseases, as I talk about in my book. These spectacular repair mechanisms are not unique to us. Evolution has bestowed them on nearly every creature on the planet. The mechanisms are at least 1 billion years old, but scientists are just now learning how to use them to our advantage to grow healthier and live longer. From the massive new research, here's one very important finding you'll want to know as you think about when to eat and not eat each day. It's this: our bodies don't start making these repairs the moment we stop eating. It's not as though you swallow your last calories, whether they're carrot sticks or French fries, and 10 minutes later your body says, all right, now we're fasting. Let's start making repairs. It doesn't work that way. It turns out that there's a metabolic cost to our bodies in making the switch from processing nutrients to making repairs. So the body doesn't want to change over to repair mode until it's sure we're done eating. It doesn't want to make that switch, pay that metabolic price, and then an hour later have us stuff more food down our throats, again, no matter whether it's broccoli or Big Macs, because if we do that, our body would have to switch out of repair mode, go back into nutrient processing mode, which exerts even more of a metabolic cost. So instead, what the body does is it waits. About 6 hours after we've eaten or drunk our last calories, the body makes the switch. But even then, it acts like it's not very confident, and the repairs accelerate only slowly. They increase hour by hour until about 12 hours after our last calories, when the repairs go into a kind of overdrive, and they keep increasing at a rapidly growing rate with every hour beyond those 12. Unfortunately, studies show that most of us are eating or drinking something caloric over 14 or 15 hours a day. That means most people are only fasting for 9 or 10 hours a night, and since it takes 6 hours to get into repair mode, they're getting only 3 or 4 hours of repairs, and they're never getting to the overdrive repairs. That's why scientists encourage longer overnight fasts. They found that we get benefits to our health starting with an overnight fast of at least 12 hours, and the benefits increase impressively with every hour we add to that 12. It makes sense, right? Someone who fasts for 16 hours a night is getting a full 10 hours in repair mode, 4 of those hours in overdrive repair mode. So that's the first big principle of my talk. We're healthier when we fast for at least 12 hours a night, and we get healthier still with even longer fasts, up to 18 hours, which means a daily eating window of as short as 6 hours. Scientists don't know yet whether an even narrower eating window, say 4 hours or even 2 hours, is good or bad for our health. Some of them worry that cramming all our food into so short a window might counterbalance the benefits we'd get from longer fasting. So for now, not many scientists recommend narrowing your window to fewer than 6 hours. Let's remember here that eating in a window of 12 or fewer hours each day is nothing new. In fact, it's how most people all over the world probably ate for millennium after millennium before the invention of electric lighting. Even before humans existed, we can pretty confidently speculate that our predecessor hominids ate almost entirely by daylight. They would start eating sometime after the sun came up in Africa, and stop eating before the sun went down when nocturnal predators had every advantage over them. Eating after the sun went down was a pretty good way to get killed and weed out the gene pool, so we almost certainly evolved to eat in the daytime, which is to say, in a window of no more than about 12 hours. I doubt it's a coincidence that that is exactly the way that most people in the blue zones have been eating right up to today, as our friend Dan Buettner has consistently found. Okay, here's another thing you need to know. Most of us who practice this kind of time-restricted eating today, and here I'm talking about people who don't live in blue zones, they do it by skipping breakfast. They wait to eat until maybe 11 a.m. or noon, they eat for 6 or 8 hours, and around 7 p.m. or so, they stop eating. That's certainly the way that I used to do it. But it turns out that eating all your food in the afternoon and evening isn't the healthiest way to eat. The healthiest way, new research suggests, is to put your eating window in the morning and early afternoon. That's because our circadian rhythms have hardwired us to process nutrients most efficiently early in the day. By mid-afternoon, those circadian rhythms will guarantee that our bodies start shutting down the nutrient processing machinery, so we get worse and worse at moving nutrients along as the day goes on. By nighttime, we're frankly pretty terrible at it. We can still digest food, of course, at night, but the problem is that the food and nutrients linger longer where they shouldn't, doing damage not just to our gastrointestinal tract, but to other parts of the body as well. The aspect of this metabolic slowdown that has been best studied has to do with glucose and insulin. Glucose is the sugar from the carbohydrates in our meals, and it's our body's preferred fuel. Insulin is the hormone that takes that glucose once it's been digested and sent into our bloodstream and moves it out of our arteries and into the cells where the glucose is used as fuel. As diabetics know, if insulin fails to move the glucose out of our arteries, the glucose will ding up the walls of the vessels, which can eventually harden, and that in turn can lead to strokes, heart attacks, dementia, impotence, blindness, and much more that's just god-awful. What scientists have recently discovered is that our insulin production, like just about everything else in our nutrient processing machinery, is strictly governed by a circadian rhythm. In the morning, our bodies produce a ton of insulin, so when we eat early, glucose is ushered very efficiently out of our bloodstream and into our cells. But in the afternoon, our bodies start shutting down our insulin production. Our cells also become less receptive to insulin, so they don't hear the knock on the door from insulin when it comes to ask the cells to open up and let the glucose in. All this means that when we eat in the late afternoon or evening, glucose lingers in our arteries longer than is good for us, and this likely contributes to a lot of our atherosclerosis, heart attacks, Alzheimer's, and so on. This rhythm with insulin is so strong that if you give pre-diabetics a meal at 7 a.m. and then give them the exact same meal at 7 p.m., their blood sugar will rise only modestly after the morning meal, but after the evening meal, many of them will test fully diabetic. In similar tests in healthy people, many of them will test pre-diabetic after the late meal. This circadian slowdown happens in nearly every aspect of our digestion and nutrient processing, and we apparently can do nothing to change it. The power of this force was brought home to me by a sad study of 15,000 attempted suicides in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has been just devastated by capitalism, and many of its farmers who have been ruined try to commit suicide by drinking their own pesticides. The study found that those who drank the poison in the morning were twice as likely to die as those who drank the poison in the evening. That's because in the morning, their digestive systems had efficiently shuttled the poison all over their bodies. So by the time they were found and rushed to a hospital, it was usually too late to save them. But in the evening, their nutrient processing machinery had started shutting down. So the poisons hadn't gotten as far. And by the time those would-be suicides were taken to a hospital, they could often be saved. So here's the second big principle of my talk. Scientists have found that the healthiest eating window seems to be one that starts about an hour or two after we wake up and runs for about 6 hours. So for a lot of people, that would mean an eating window from maybe 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Studies of people who eat this way show impressive improvements in just days or weeks. Dramatically more recycling of worn-out organelles inside their cells, less oxidative damage to their cells, big drops in their high blood pressure, their high cholesterol, and their high triglycerides, less stress on the insulin-making cells in their pancreas, less dramatic sugar spikes throughout the day, less inflammation, even less hunger. That one always surprises people. People say, well, wait a minute, I'm fasting for 18 hours each day, and yet I'm less hungry in the evening than when I was eating dinner at the normal time? But it turns out that when we extend our overnight fasts, we burn a little more fat each night, which is broken down into ketone bodies, and those ketones actually suppress our hunger hormones. Pretty nifty, huh? Now, I know that eating from 8 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon sounds crazy. Believe me, I hated hearing that myself. Most of my life, I had skipped breakfast, and I loved having big dinners and eating well into the night. But I'm also a believer in following the science, so I decided to make an experiment of eating in an early window for a few weeks. To my immense surprise, it turned out to be the easiest big change I've ever made. For a start, it took only a couple of days for my body to adapt. So after just 2 or 3 days, I no longer missed dinner. It was as if my body had been waiting for me to make the change all along. With almost no effort then, my half-century habit of eating dinner every single night just vanished, and I didn't mourn it a bit. The reason is that I soon noticed some truly lovely benefits. Food cravings that had plagued me for many years disappeared. I no longer had sugar crashes with those overwhelming urges to eat, that desperate need for calories that came over me when my energy waned in the afternoon as it usually did. In fact, on my new eating schedule, my energy soared, and even better, my weight stabilized for the first time in years. It was just fantastic. Volunteers in clinical trials have reported many of these same effects. For me, it all went so well that even after my test period, I decided to keep eating in an early window, which I've done for over 2 years now, and I would not go back for the world. Now, I know that not everyone can eat this way. I'm a freelance reporter who works at home, so I'm in the awfully lucky position of getting to set my own schedule. Most people can't do that. Also, some people just want to eat dinner at the normal time. It's our most social meal of the day, and at the end of a long day, it's no mystery why people enjoy getting together and relaxing with food. For all those people, I have some good news. There may be a compromise, which brings me to the third big principle of my talk. Scientists think that if you eat most of your calories early in the day, from morning to early afternoon, you may be able to get many of the benefits of eating in an early window. In practice, this means eating a bigger breakfast and lunch, and then keeping your dinner light and on the early side. It turns out that the adage to eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper was good advice. Although, even better advice was that of the Russian general who supposedly said, "Eat breakfast yourself, share lunch with a friend, and give dinner away to your enemy." Okay, that's a lot of information, so let's just recap what the science says. Number 1, eat in a window of 6 to 12 hours. The fewer hours, the better. Number 2, eat in a window that starts an hour or 2 after waking and that stops, if possible, by mid-afternoon. Number 3, if you need to eat dinner, keep it early and light. Breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, dinner like a pauper. So how do you go about implementing these principles in your own life? Here's what fasting scientists and doctors tell me. They say that some people can just immediately overhaul everything about when they eat. They chop their eating window in half, they move it earlier in the day, and they never look back. If that's you, you already know who you are, and you probably don't need much more advice from me. But for everyone else, keep listening, because there is a way to make these changes gradually that seems to work. Experts recommend, as a first step, just tracking your normal eating window for a few days. It'll vary a little from day to day, so just figure out the average time when you start eating each day and the average number of hours you eat. Once you know roughly when and how long you're eating each day, set yourself a window that starts at the same time every morning and that runs for however many hours is normal for you. Eat that way for a few days. The consistency of the start time each day is apparently really important for helping sync our metabolism with our body's other vital rhythms. You can vary the start time by a half hour, maybe even an hour from day to day, but scientists say not much more than that. Once you've got your window set, simply shave an hour off it each week. So, for example, let's say you track yourself, you find you're eating across 14 hours a day. You set your eating window from, let's say, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. You do that for a few days and then shave an hour off your window. So you're now eating in a 13-hour window that ends at 8 p.m. instead of 9 p.m. Do that for a week. If that feels okay, then next week, shave it to a 12-hour window that ends at 7 p.m. Next week, shave off another hour, and so on. If you need to pause for a few weeks at a certain window before shaving off another hour, go for it. The point is just to gradually shave off hours until you found the narrowest window that's comfortable for you, and then stop there. Experts emphasize a comfortable window. You don't want something that's impossible to maintain, or even something that's a real stretch to do every day. You want something that feels very doable. And here's a piece of advice from psychologists. One thing you absolutely don't want to do is to beat yourself up if you can't get your window all the way down to 6 or 8 hours. If you were eating in 14 hours before and you get down to 12, you will be improving your health. You should celebrate yourself for moving in that healthier direction. If you're one of those lucky people, sure, your circumstances allow you to get down to 10 or 8 hours, super, go for it and give yourself a big pat on the back. But if you have a crazy life and you can't narrow the window as far as you'd like, don't kick yourself for it. It's like going for a 3-mile jog and then kicking yourself because you didn't run a marathon. Please don't fall into that trap. celebrate the victory of getting off the couch, or in this case, skipping those bedtime snacks that are so very bad for us. You're on the road to better health, and that is a truly beautiful thing. Let me give you just a few more details before I close. I often get asked, is eating this way safe for everyone? The answer from scientists is that it's safe for virtually every adult to eat in a window down to 6 hours. For children who aren't nursing, it's safe to eat in a window of 12 hours, just as children all over the world did for many thousands of years before electric lighting expanded our eating windows. We may yet learn that it's safe and possibly even healthier for children to eat in fewer than 12 hours, but that hasn't been tested yet, so nobody recommends it. Scientists and doctors also say that children who are nursing or of nursing age should not have their eating window limited at all. They should eat whenever they want. One of the few cautions is for people taking medications, which admittedly is a lot of us. Experts recommend you talk to your doctor first to see if the timing of the medication needs to be changed. If you're on a high dose of insulin, for example, taking it during your fast could make you hypoglycemic, so you may need to adjust the timing. But once you've got the timing right, experts say it's safe to do a daily fast. One other question I get asked a lot, in fact, all the time, is does my morning cup of coffee break my overnight fast? The short answer is that caffeinated drinks, even with 0 calories, do disrupt some aspects of fasting metabolism. But here's the catch. Scientists don't know precisely which mechanisms, so they don't know if the disruption is big or small. To be on the safe side, don't drink caffeinated drinks during your fasting period. Caffeine-free herbal teas are better, but the best drink of all is plain water, and if you want a hot drink, you can always warm it. Another question I often get is whether eating or drinking something caloric that's just a tiny amount of whatever it is will disrupt a fast. The answer from the best evidence we have so far suggests that anything over 5 calories, that's 1.5 grapes, that's a teaspoon and a half of soy milk, seems to break your fast and jerk your body out of repair mode. If you haven't gone into repair mode yet, say it's 2 hours after you've eaten dinner, those 5 calories will reset the whole nutrient processing and repair cycle and will move your repairs back another 6 hours. All right, final recap of the 3 big principles of daily fasting. 1. Eat in a window of 6 to 12 hours. The fewer hours, the better. 2. Eat in a window that starts an hour or 2 after waking and that stops, if possible, by mid-afternoon. 3. If you need to eat dinner, keep it early and light. Breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, dinner like a pauper. For more information on this and many other aspects of fasting, there is, as I say, a great new book on fasting that I can't recommend highly enough. The Oldest Cure in the World is available just about anywhere books are sold, including at a great outfit called bookshop.org, which gives the profits to your local bookstore, bookshop.org. There's also a lot of information at my website, stevehendricks.org. On my frequently asked questions page, you'll see I have more than, 10,000 or so words of answers to the most common questions I get about both daily and prolonged fasting. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you heard something that helps you find outstanding health.